Friends, welcome to this edition of We Need God, a podcast by Father Andrew Carrozza, a priest of the Archdiocese of New York and pastor of St. Anne's Parish in Yonkers, New York. We Need God will address why we need God in our lives, how to know who He truly is, and how to follow Him with an authentic faith that will change our lives. It is especially directed towards young adults to help them wade through the many confusing opinions of modern religion that affect them. Please relax now and join Father Carrozza for this episode.
Welcome to my first edition of We Need God podcast. I am Father Andrew Carrozza, pastor of St. Anne's Church in Yonkers, New York, and I do a lot of work with young people. My purpose for this podcast is to reach out to all people and bring them to Christ and His Church, but especially to our young people. Our young adults are our future, and yet this is the group that we discover is leaving the Church in larger droves than others. A lot of the reasons why they're leaving are because they're disillusioned by many different things happening. A lot of times they've been fed misinformation, and other times they have questions but nobody who can answer them for them. So that is what I wish to do in this podcast, to explain, to answer questions, and help lead people to a closer engagement with Christ and His Church. And my first topic I want to discuss is, why do we need God anyway? But before we go there, in looking at young people, while we notice there are very few young people these days that seem to come to church on Sunday, that doesn't mean that they're not interested in God. 90% of Americans, according to studies, believe in God, and over 80% would call themselves spiritual. I've had many discussions with young people in my over 29 years as a priest. And a lot of times I'll hear them saying, I'm very spiritual, I want God in my life, but they don't know how to find Him. And for whatever reason, they have given up on formal cultic worship in Mass on Sunday. Reasons for that we will discuss further at another time. But that doesn't mean they're not interested in God. In fact, I see a lot of telltale signs among our young people that they do still want God in their lives. How many young people I see with religious tattoos? I know young people who go out right away and get a rosary tattoo, a crucifix, a glowing cross. I saw a young man just yesterday who had a beautiful tattoo all over his arm of Saint Therese, of the child Jesus. And it's an indication to me when I see that these people want God in their life, and they are hungering for more. They want to know Him, but they don't know how to find Him. So the hunger is there. But before we can feed the hunger adequately, I think we have to ask a few questions. First of all, why do we need God in the first place? There are some people, certainly in the world, who would say we don't need God. And in fact, that's been going on in our society for several hundred years now. Ever since the Enlightenment began, it's become the age of man and reason, that we don't need God anymore. We can follow ourselves in our own minds. And the causes of that, of course, are due to things that are beyond my discussion here in this podcast. But we receive the effects of it, and we're all under its effects. And we see that happening especially in public schools. Somehow we've gotten an idea that public schools have to be God-free zones in many places across the nation. While it's certainly not true everywhere, where I live here in New York, it is very much a real thing. And even some places, so as not to look like they are favoring any religion or another, especially at Christmas time, go to the point that you can't even mention Christmas. Some schools in our area have banned the wearing of jingle bells, using candy canes, even wearing red and green clothing to even show that they're acknowledging Christmas, for fear that they might be bringing God into a public school setting. But then what happens when there's a school shooting? Right away, a lot of people are asking, why did God let this happen? Well, by what logic can we expect God to be there when we try to keep him out of our schools? We can't, on the one hand, say we can do this without God and then expect God to be there when we need him. Just looking at the world around us, I think we can realize that our attempt to fix the world on our own is failing miserably. We need God. We cannot do it on our own. We've been trying, and I think by now we have to admit the obvious. We're making a mess of it on our own. We need God in our lives. And let me give you some examples of where faith has come through for people. I remember many years ago, we had a woman in our parish who passed away very suddenly. No warning to the family at all. She was only in her 30s, had several young children. And while the woman herself we knew regularly at Mass, her family did not attend Mass. And when I went to the wake, her sister said to me right away, "I hate God for doing this to my sister." Of course, now was not the right time for me to be able to tell her or give her a full explanation of how God works. But I went to one of the brothers and said, "I'm so sorry, can I do anything?" And he says, "Yeah, you can bring her back to life." And he threw himself on the casket. And the whole funeral was one where for the first time in my life, I think I had witnessed despair. And I noticed that the father was trying very hard afterwards to bring the children back, and he brought them into church, was lighting candles, but there was nothing there. You see, we can't just turn on God when we need him without any preparation beforehand, without that life of prayer and that regular relationship with him that builds the strength and the roots of the relationship and the faith that will keep us during those times. If you can think of the old-fashioned pumps where they used to have the water pumps that you had to prime. If you did not prime the pump and you turned on the spigot, nothing would come out. So you can't go to a spigot without priming the pump, and neither can we just find God, even being away from him for many years, and expect that we're just going to find him present. Prayer, like anything else, has to be practiced, has to be lived out each and every day. And I felt sad for that family. Around the same time, there was another family, a couple who were in my parish, whose son, who lived out of state, didn't live locally, again, a man married with several children, developed a very quick illness or something that he was diagnosed, I think, in July and passed away in September. And it was painful for them, certainly, but they got through it because the woman came to me and said, "Father, God is getting me through this. Thank God for my faith in him." And they were able to heal and move on. Sure, they cried. Sure, they missed him. But because they had that regular abiding faith in God, it helped them through those difficult times. Even just yesterday, I had a woman call and speak to me and tell me that her son had died tragically very recently. And she said, "Right now, the only thing I need is God. He's the only one who can help me." And there was so much truth in that. In addition to being there when we need him, what does following God do for us now? It gives us character. It gives us dignity. It gives us a purpose-driven life. And people with great, solid faith, I'm not talking about religious fanatics, people who live out their faith firmly and prayerfully in God are often the strongest people we meet, the most joyful people we meet, people who know what their life is about, and they can live a purpose-driven life. There are so many young people I meet in the world who are always asking to find themselves. They want to know what life is about. They're looking for God, but they don't know how to find him. That's what I want to do. Through this podcast, I'd like to help young people especially learn how to find God and how to live the life that he wants us to live. In future podcasts, we will look at further questions on how do we find God and how do we know what he wants to do for us. And may God bless you.
Thank you for listening to this week's podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please pass the word on to your friends and invite them to listen. For more materials from Father Carrozza, please visit www.fathercarrozza.com.